Valentine's Day, a holiday dedicated to love, and what better way to celebrate than to visit the saint himself, or at least his bones. From a skull in Rome to a vial of blood in Dublin, the relics of this mysterious figure are scattered across Europe. But do these remains really belong to the man behind the myth? Who was he, if he even existed at all? This is The Resurrectionists. Hello everybody and welcome to the Resurrectionists podcast. This week we are going to be discussing Saint Valentine and his remains or relics that are spread all across Europe. So I'm hoping to make this episode a little shorter than the last two because they got away from me a little bit. So let's get straight into it. After I remind you all to please leave comments on the YouTube video, or if you're on Spotify, or reach out to me on Instagram. I will yet again be posting images to do with this week's episode on my Instagram, which is @TheResurrectionWoman. So you can leave comments there or you can DM me because I will be taking all of your comments and questions and using them for the special episode at the end of the season. So without further ado, let's get into this week's episode on Saint Valentine. So there have been several Saint Valentines that have been canonized by the church, but it is most commonly believed that the Saint Valentine associated with the holiday was a Roman who was born in Italy. This Saint Valentine is thought to have been born in the 3rd century during the 1.5-year reign of Emperor Claudius II, aka Claudius Gothicus, which, that's a cool name. It makes me want to be like, it's not a phase, Mom. Which in my case, it wasn't a phase, Mom. I grew up and I still work with dead people. Suck it. So it is said that this Valentine was born in 226. Oh, sugar. I didn't put AD or BC on my notes. That was smart. Good job, Megan. AD. It's AD. I put AD later on. 226 AD. I got there. He was said to be born in the small town of Terni in Italy, and he grew up to become a Christian priest. So at this time in the Roman Empire, Rome was at war with the Goths, which I'm presuming is where the name Claudius Gothicus came from. Don't quote me on that. I'm a classicist, but this is not my area of expertise. So the sort of story that goes behind this Saint Valentine, or the Saint Valentines of the holiday, let's say, is that the Emperor Claudius believed that young single men made for better and stronger warriors because they weren't distracted by thoughts of the families that they had left behind to go to war. And therefore he outlawed marriage to, I guess, sort of encourage or, ensure that his soldiers were all single men who were wholly dedicated to this war against the Goths. And it is said that this Saint Valentine, at the time just a priest named Valentine, was found to be performing illegal marriage ceremonies and was therefore arrested by Claudius's soldiers. So in punishment for this, Claudius sentenced Valentine to death after having him severely beaten by soldiers using bats, I believe I read somewhere. This is one version of the story. Another version of the story is that Valentine was found to be helping Christians escape from Roman prisons and that's why he's arrested. Obviously, the marrying young couples illegally part of it makes more sense for the romantic nature of the holiday, but we'll get a little more into that as well later on. So there are these sort of two differing versions. It could be a mixture of both as well, as opposed to just one or the other. So keep that in mind. All of this is with a grain of salt as well, which we'll get into in a minute. So another story that goes along with this is that after Valentine was imprisoned, he was found to be writing love letters to a young woman thought to possibly be the jailer's daughter. And these letters are said to be the first, quote unquote, Valentine's letters, because before his death, he signed his last letter to this young woman as "from your Valentine." So that's the story about where we get the whole "from your Valentine, love letters on Valentine's Day" thing from. So on February 14th, 270 AD, Valentine was executed via beheading. So he had his head cut off. And after his death, parts of his skeleton were taken and distributed to churches across Europe. Allegedly. So it is common in many Christian churches for body parts or bodily tissue or any parts of a saint's body be revered and treated as a religious relic. They're thought to or are believed to hold some of the power of the saint still in them. They are also said to sort of have different properties, I guess. My dad just did part of the Camino, and so he visited a lot of different churches, and a lot of them had these relics in them. And there was one he was saying where it's the entire body of a saint in a casket, and there's a hole at the bottom of the casket, and you used to be able to, you can't anymore, it's behind a metal grate, but you used to be able to put your hand up through the hole in the bottom of the casket and touch the skeleton, and it was said to give you longevity. So there's different powers, I guess, associated with different saints' relics, usually associated to the stories behind those saints. And so that's why a lot of them are like on display in churches, and a lot of churches will have the remains of saints. These can be bones, they can be body parts, they can be blood, like I mentioned in the intro. And another big part of having relics as well is that they bolster tourism and pilgrimages to these churches. So people will go to churches to see the remains of Saint Valentine because they believe it holds the property to, I don't know, improve their love life or their bless their marriage or something like that. Or they'll go to visit this casket in Spain because it's thought to give you longevity, you know. So people will intentionally go to these churches to visit these relics in the hope of absorbing whatever power it's said that they held. So in the case of Saint Valentine, his skull is in a basilica in Rome. His shoulder or his scapula is said to be in Prague. There are miscellaneous bones in Glasgow and Madrid, and his leg, I believe tibia, and a vial of his blood are in Dublin. Interestingly enough, when you look this up online, a lot of articles will state that his heart is in Dublin, but that's not true. It's his tibia and a vial of blood. So I don't know where the story of his heart being in Dublin is. Maybe it's a different saint. I think there actually is possibly a saint's heart in Dublin, but it's not Valentine. So just keep that in mind if you're looking this up. I don't know where that came from, but that's not true because I live in Dublin, in case you don't know. And I did go to see the relics of Saint Valentine when I was a child. I have no recollection of it, but I have seen them. I do vaguely have a recollection of my mom pointing at something and being like, that's the heart of a saint. So that's where I'm getting the idea that there is possibly a saint's heart in Dublin, but it's not Saint Valentine's. And if you look up videos on YouTube of the church itself, there are videos of the relics of Saint Valentine in the Dublin church. So I can confirm it is not his heart. Just keep that in mind. So like I said, the story of Saint Valentine is sort of entwined with love, with these like star-crossed lovers, with illegal marriages, and with Valentine falling in love with the jailer's daughter and writing the first Valentine's letter. It's all entwined with love, and therefore Valentine is honored after his death as being the patron saint of love and the namesake of Saint Valentine's Day. But that's sort of how the story goes when you start looking into the facts of it, which is exceedingly difficult to do. It kind of starts to maybe fall apart or get very questionable at the very least. I just want to say for this episode, I tried to do research. There are like almost no academic articles on any of this. I was going off of a lot of like newspaper reports, and as I've mentioned, they're wrong. I mean, whether it's a heart or legs and a vial of blood in Dublin is consistently wrong, and that's something that is relatively easy to fact check. So the rest of the stuff about Valentine being possibly wrong, like, it's even more difficult to fact check. Everything I'm saying is with a grain of salt, and as always, there is a reference list in the description below so you can do your own research, and I always encourage people to do their own research and think critically about the stuff you're reading, because even the stuff that can be easily fact-checked is wrong. So I don't know about the stuff that's like centuries old and is way more difficult to fact-check. I tried. If you look at the reference list, there's maybe like 3 academic articles in it, and most of them are to do with the Lupercalia, which I'll get into in a minute, not Saint Valentine, because literally nothing exists. I'm sorry, I tried. Take everything with a grain of salt. So Valentine's Day is thought to be a Christianization of a pagan fertility and harvest festival that used to take place on February 15th, called the Lupercalia, as I mentioned before. And this festival is thought to be in honor of the wolf Lupa, who is said to be the adoptive mother of Romulus and Remus, who were the founders of Rome. I will include actually in the Instagram post to do with this episode a photo of me in front of the Lupa statue with Romulus and Remus when I was in Pisa recently. I intentionally took real dad vacation looking photos because I had a dad shirt on. Go to the Instagram, check it out. This holiday is also thought to be associated with the god Faunus as well. Lupercalia, Lupa, that makes sense. And like I said, it's to do with fertility and harvest and stuff like that, probably as it's coming into around that spring season as well. So there are differing historical accounts as to what took place during this festival. Some mention men running naked through the streets and women being whipped to increase their fertility. I don't know how that works scientifically, but okay, Romans, you do you. There are debates between academics as to the validity of these claims. That's most of the academic articles that I have in my reference list were debating what the Lupercalia is and the claims, the historical claims as to what took place during the Lupercalia as well. So there is a lot of uncertainty surrounding the Lupercalia festival, and it's unknown if there was really any connection between it and Saint Valentine's Day, other than the fact that they take place on consecutive days, one being the 14th of February and the other being the 15th of February. But I did think it was important to sort of mention that it is commonly thought that Valentine's Day is a Christianization of this pagan holiday, because when you look it up, like the history of Valentine's Day, like it does come up. Like I said, there's no evidence that the two are connected. There's no strong evidence that the two are connected. There's not even really a lot of strong evidence as to what the Lupercalia was, but it comes up often, so I thought I'd mention it. So when I was looking up Saint Valentine as well, I found a lot of articles which stated that there are at least 3 Saint Valentines within the Catholic Church. I also saw a couple that said that there are 16 in the Vatican's official encyclopedia of saints. So there's more than one Saint Valentine, potentially the number of which I am uncertain. I also saw somewhere written that all of the Saint Valentines that are mentioned, I think this was in relation to 3, the number 3, not the number 16, but that all of them were executed on February 14th, which seems highly unlikely to me that you get 3 people named Valentine who are all sainted, who are all executed on the same day. So yeah, I don't know where that came from, but I personally don't think that that's likely. But it's out there, it's been mentioned, so I am relaying the facts as I have found them to you. Make of them what you will. Actually, I don't even think I should call them facts. I am relaying the source, information available out there to you as I have found it. Interpret it as you will. So what's more is there's no actual proof that any Saint Valentine performed any kind of rituals associated with love or marriage. It's possible that this story is a more modern tale to be tacked onto the holiday of Saint Valentine's Day, and that the stories around the original saint itself have sort of been lost to time, and we've just taken this new story about the saint who was illegally marrying people and fell in love while in prison and all of that, and like tacked it on to this holiday because they go together well. So yeah, there's no actual proof that any Saint Valentine performed any kind of rituals regarding love or marriage or anything like that. So what's more, the actual holiday of Saint Valentine's Day being a celebration of love isn't spoken about or mentioned until 1375 by the British author Geoffrey Chaucer, which is over 1,000 years since Saint Valentine was said to have lived. So again, there's this huge disconnect between the man himself and the potential man himself and the holiday as it stands today. And it's kind of a blank period of about 1,000 years in the middle there, where we're not really sure how one went to being the other. It is possible that the holiday of St. Valentine's Day is actually more connected with birds pairing off. I guess February 14th-ish is around when birds start mating up and pairing off. And so it's possible that that's why that date was chosen for St. Valentine's Day, or to be a day associated with a festival of love or something like that. So it's likely that the story we have about Saint Valentine or Valentine's Day is sort of an amalgamation of different stories and different people's lives, different legends with different facts, which have been pieced together and edited over the centuries to sort of produce this tale of a patron saint of love and this holiday that celebrates love. So interestingly enough, Saint Valentine was removed from the general Roman calendar in 1969 due to the lack of any reliable information regarding him. So even in the Roman calendar, they deemed this information regarding him to be unreliable, or I guess maybe there's just too many Valentines and too many stories and they can't really fact check anything. It's been removed from the Roman calendar now. So this of course raises the question, if we don't know who Saint Valentine was, or if he was really a real person at all, how do we know that we have his bones or his blood for that matter? Well, there is no actual proof that any of the human remains claiming to belong to Saint Valentine are actually the genuine articles from the Saint Valentine of Valentine's Day, or any Saint Valentine at all, really. In fact, it is highly likely that the remains in the different churches are each from different individuals. It's possible that the remains in the same church are from different individuals as well. Like I said, in Dublin, there are both bones and blood. It's quite possible that both of these are from completely different people, neither of whom was named Valentine. So there has never been any genetic or isotopic analysis done on any of the remains, which could lend itself to showing whether or not the remains all belong to the same person, whether the individual the remains belong to are all from the same area, stuff like that, to just sort of lead credence to them at least being the same person. Obviously, I don't think we'd ever be able to prove that they belong to St. Valentine, since we don't know if St. Valentine was real or not, but we could at least try and prove that they're from the same person, or at least from people from the same region, or at least from people from Italy, that specific area in Italy where Saint Valentine's said to be from. You could possibly do that depending on what kind of bones they are and what state of preservation they're in with genetic or isotopic analysis, but this has never been done, and therefore we can't say that these remains belong to Saint Valentine or even to one person. So interestingly enough, a couple of years ago, the skull of Saint Valentine in Rome got fairly popular because there was a facial reconstruction done on the skull to give an image of what they believed this individual would have looked like. So this facial reconstruction was produced by a graphic designer and a photographer, and I've included in the reference list below a blog post on how they did the facial reconstruction, which includes images of the process as well. So if you're interested in learning more, you can check that out there. Just some of the things I want to mention to do with this facial reconstruction as well. And I want to say off the bat, I am no expert in facial reconstruction. I've never done facial reconstruction. I think I had like 15 minutes in a 1-hour lecture once where they talked about facial reconstruction. And I remember them saying that it is a highly specialized field and it's a mixture between science and artistic license, and that even people who are very good at facial reconstructions get them wrong because they are exceedingly difficult to do. And there's a lot of variables that go into them. I don't know a lot about facial reconstructions, but I just wanted to try and discuss this one with my very basic understanding of facial reconstruction and my more than basic understanding of osteology. It's said in the blog post that the individuals who are doing this, they essentially just went to the basilica in Rome and asked could they take pictures of the skull, and they were granted permission to do so. However, they themselves had never taken the photos before. They'd have someone else do it for them. So they took 151 photos to try and prevent any errors. Essentially, the more photos you have, the more likely it is that you have usable photos in the batch. So they overtook photos. I think they ended up using like 39 of the 251. But I think it's important to note that the people taking the images hadn't done that before. They'd done facial reconstruction before, but they'd never taken the images to base the facial reconstruction off of before. And they're taking these photos from behind the glass. So the skull is in this sort of ornate gold, or at least gold gilded box behind a pane of glass. And it's also like sitting on a bed of flowers and stuff like that as well. And it's got a little, not a sticker, I'm sure it's made out of like metal or something, but like a sign thing across the forehead that says Valentine on it. Again, images will be on my Instagram if you want to check these out. But they are taking photos from behind this glass. So they didn't have physical access to the skull. I believe they were able to get more up close to it than the general public would be able to, but it's still, you're taking these photos from behind the glass as well. Therefore, that means that they're only really getting the surface of the skull, like the face part of it. You're not getting the whole skull as well. So keep that in mind as well when you're looking at this facial reconstruction. So what they did was, once that they had created a 3D model of the skull using the photogrammetry from the images that they took of the skull, they removed the name part that says Valentine on it, and they sent it to a forensic anthropologist to look at. And so that was kind of a blind study on his part. He didn't know who the skull belonged to, and he apparently identified it as male of European ancestry, aged over 55 years. The male part and the European ancestry part, I could understand potentially how you could get that from the part of the skull that is visible, but I don't understand how he was aging it. I don't know, actually, based off the blog post, if the age is what he said, or that they were just presuming the age was over 55 because they're presuming this is Saint Valentine. They were saying that when they were doing the tissue markers for the facial reconstruction, they did them based off of a male of European ancestry over 55 years. So I don't know if the forensic anthropologist aged this individual. If so, I don't know how he did. I also looked up this individual who did this identification, and he has a lot of expertise in forensic anthropology, but a lot of it's to do with dentistry and like dental stuff. So I don't know if maybe you can age someone using their teeth, but you wouldn't do it on a Roman individual, and you can't see the skull's teeth properly to really do that. So unless there's some technique that I'm unfamiliar with, I don't know where they got the age 55 from. Again, it's possible that this wasn't the forensic anthropologist who gave them this age. It's possible that they just plucked the age out of nowhere because they're presuming that this is Saint Valentine and that he would have been over 55 years when he died. I don't really know what's going on there, but I just thought I'd mention that. So they added tissue markers to the 3D model that they'd created and started fleshing it out. Like I said, they only had the surface of the skull as well. So they had to kind of just place a blank rest of the skull onto it, if that makes sense as well, to sort of ensure that they had the whole head, but they're kind of just sticking the face onto a generic rest of the skull as well. So all of this is to say, I'm not sure how reliable this facial reconstruction is. Again, it was done by a graphic designer and a photographer with some input from a forensic anthropologist, but he wasn't the one doing it. So I don't want to shit on these guys. Like, it's interesting work and it clearly got a lot of media attention. I just don't know how accurate it is. So yeah, just keep that in mind if you're looking at these images as well, or if you see stuff to do with that. I'm not entirely sure how accurate all of this is. So if we're unsure that these remains belong to Saint Valentine, or even if these remains belong to one person at all, why do the churches have them? Why do they have them on display? Well, like I said, having relics sort of increases tourism and pilgrimages to the areas. So it's possible, probable, likely that despite knowing or thinking or presuming that these may not be the genuine articles, churches do still have them on display because they increase people coming into the churches and obviously donating to the churches as well. I wonder about the ethics about having it. I always wonder about the ethics about having human remains on display anyway, but I wonder about the ethics of having human remains of dubious origin on display as specific individuals as well. I'm sure there are some relics that churches have on display that have much more solid origins associated with them. The only ones I was really looking at for this were St. Valentine's, and all of them are of rather dubious origin. I can't seem to find anywhere where any of these originally came from and how they found their way to the specific churches that they ended up in as well. So it's possible that at some point there were records of where they came from, or they just sort of popped up and no one questioned it. But yeah, I do wonder about the ethics of all of this, and I would be interested as to what you guys think about this as well. Do you think that any of these remains belong to Saint Valentine? Do you think that any of them belong to the same person? What do you think about having relics in general on display? Have you guys ever visited any religious relics? Have you ever visited Saint Valentine? I have to go back to the place in Dublin where they have them, and I have to go see them for myself sometime soon. That would definitely be on the Instagram when I do. But yeah, there's just a lot of questions surrounding this one, and I'd be interested to discuss it with you guys further in the comments or on Instagram if you're interested. So like I said, this was going to be a short episode. I tried to bulk it out as much as I could, but there really is very little information available on all of this stuff. There is an entire book about relics, religious relics, and the section on Saint Valentine is like not even a paragraph and a half. So the information about this is very sketchy at best. I tried to pull together as much as I could, and honestly, researching this episode stressed me out so much, because if I can't find an academic article for something, I don't trust anything else. Like, the amount of newspaper articles and websites that are in my reference list, I don't like it. I don't have pretty much any academic sources, and that stresses me out. I don't like not being able to academically reference something. So this episode was an experience for me. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you found it interesting, and I would be interested to hear from you in the comments below. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye, guys.